my general argument for the course is going to be that the degree of your creativity is going to depend on your immersion in your culture. And what that culture is can be different for different people. In other words, you could be into hip hop, someone else could be into quantum theory, someone else could be into whatever, but you'll find it all around you. And I use the term swim in it. And I think that very often really creative people don't say, okay, how do I be creative? What's going on? How can I tap into it? They just are. For them, that's, like we're all here and saying this is the world. Well, David Karp, lived in a digital world. And he said, well, how come nobody else gets it? So he creates Tumblr. And so my argument is that very often we don't know what we know unless we allow ourselves to, or we don't experience what we're experiencing, is a better way to put it. Okay, one more movie. Put it on the list. How many people have seen The Truman Show? Okay, wow, great. Did we talk about this before?
No.
Okay, so what is The Truman Show about?
It's kind of like Big Brother-ish, but it's about control. And I don't even know how to explain it without just talking about the movie.
Okay, someone else want to try what it's about? Now, I'm going to suggest that it's not really about surveillance. It's about something else.
It has a lot to do about society and how society wants to watch this one person grow up.
And more than that, if we think of Truman, what he's being directed to do.
Yeah.
Here's my argument. I'm trying to look like a teacher. You guys are trying to look like students. What do I need to do to be a good student? How do I be attentive? Should I raise my hand? What should I wear when I go to class? What should a student do? What are they looking for? And I'm saying, what do they expect of me? How should I act? How should I be convincing that I'm a professor? That's how Truman is living. And then one day he says, I'm not going to do that anymore. What if I just be me? And I don't even know what that is, but I'm going to find out and I'm going to be me. I'm not going to be who they want me to be. I'm going to be who I am. I'm not going to have the marriage they want for me. I'm going to find the girl who clicks for me. I'm not going to do the job. I've got a great job in a beautiful town. Everybody's nice to me. Why rock the boat? And he does. He says, I don't want what they're arranging for me. I want to find out who I am. So that's one take on what the Truman Show is. And so Truman seeks to become who he is. My suggestion is your creativity will come when you identify who you are and start being that. It's not easy. You know, the society, now, it's easier, maybe it's easier in some cultures than others. Just to pick on some Asian cultures might still be more, you know, wanting you to be in the mold of the culture. And but I'm going to suggest creativity comes from swimming in, being immersed in, experiencing your culture. Now, what is your culture? There's some things we all share. There's some things in different fields. There's some things that you're going to find that make sense for you. So from that perspective, let's just look at some cultures. And we're still kind of feeling around for a definition of culture. But here's two different worlds. They're not the only two, but I like to describe this as the most important example of Western sculpture, and this is my favorite Eastern sculpture. So this is Michelangelo's David, 1503 roughly, or 1501, 1504. And this is Prajna Paramita, goddess of transcendent wisdom, 1300 from Indonesia. Male, female, eyes open, eyes closed. The psychological character behind these furrowed brows, and an attempt to let thought go, let character go, and relate to transcendent oneness. So, two very different cultural approaches to who and what we are as human beings. This one might not be true for us today. This is a Renaissance humanist position 500 years ago, but we can think about it. And then my argument is that a work of art or architecture, literature, music, is a crystallization of the culture of its day. So here's Mies van der Rohe, architect noted for glass and steel. Here's the Seagram building. Architecture is the real battleground of the spirit. Architecture depends on its time. Architecture is the crystallization of its time's inner structure, the slow unfolding of its form. In other words, architecture is a manifestation of a culture in form. And anything we do creatively will be that. Now, I'm going to reject an argument that cultures are materially based. So this is a big bestseller from a few years back, still a very prominent book, Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. And Diamond argues that cultures get the way they are and are different one from another because of their material circumstances. So, for example, why were the Europeans able to conquer North and South America?
They had guns.
They had guns, but Cortés had only 500 men, and the Aztecs, the capital of the Aztec Empire was bigger than any European city of the day. There was 1 million people there. Pardon? That was part of it, but the big one was smallpox. Europeans came, they had all these diseases that they were resistant to because they had had them for centuries. And they had the germs with them. The Americas had not been exposed to those diseases and swept through and obliterated them in no time flat. So horses, guns are part of it. But so what Diamond says is true, but it's not adequate. Why were the Europeans in the Americas? Why weren't the Americans invading Europe? You know, what was it about these different cultures that made them be the way they were? And here are 4 very important works of architecture and 4 very different religions and 4, therefore, very different worldviews. So here is, what's this? This is St. Peter's in Rome, the most important Catholic building. This part is by Michelangelo, the colonnades by Bernini. And in Catholicism, you get access to transcendence through the institution of the church. You don't read the Bible and you don't experience God directly, but the priest is under the dome, you're in the audience. So that theology is manifest in the architecture. Architecture is a manifestation in form of a particular spiritual worldview. This is the great mosque of Cordoba, Islamic. Everybody is equal in the mosque. There is no pope in Islam. They're respected teachers, but there's no religious hierarchy. Everybody is equal before God. And that uniform equality is symbolized here. This is the Borobudur stupa in Indonesia. And the interest is in levels of consciousness to transcendence. And we see these levels here. Anybody know what this is?
Japan temple, right? Japan temple that they have to rebuild every 20 or 30 years.
20 years, correct. So this is Ise Shrine in Japan. It's a Shinto shrine. Shinto is sort of the native Japanese religion. And they deliberately make it out of wood that's unfinished and will rot. See this green mold growing into the roof here. And then they build a new one and tear it down. 20 years later, vice versa. It's been going on for 1,000 years. So the idea that we are part of a process of nature. We don't build in stone to try to defy natural processes, but rather participate in them. Now, going further with this idea of cultures as symbolic, ideas rather than material means of production. So let's look at 2, and this will be very superficial, but Egyptian and Mayan. So they both built pyramids. They both have pantheons of gods. They both practice mummification. They both practice brother-sister marriage of royalty. They both maintain king lines. They both have hieroglyphic writing. They're both theocratic or nation states, highly stratified societies, dynastic succession of rulers, typical features of statehood, syncretic state religion, elite priesthood, cosmos as world mountain. They're pretty similar. Let's look at their material circumstances. They both practiced large-scale agriculture. Egyptians, wheat, Mayans, corn. That's about it. The Egyptians are in a desert, Mayans are in a tropical rainforest. The Egyptians have bronze, that's pretty sophisticated. Next step is steel. The Mayans have no bronze or even copper. The Mayans don't even have the wheel. I mean, how backward can you get? The Egyptians have sophisticated war chariots. Egyptians have horses and draft animals, like oxen to drag things. Mayans have no horses, no draft animals. Oh, and they're 3,000 years and 7,000 miles apart. How'd they get so similar? Well, that's another course. But the point is, they share an underlying symbolic worldview. They are cultural cousins for underlying symbolic reasons, not because of material means of production. So cultures are symbolic entities. So there are maybe 9 world high cultures. High culture being when you have writing, theocratic nation state, monumental architecture, standing armies. But here are 5 of them, and let's look at their symbolic worldviews. In China, Japan, and Korea, and anybody here can correct me, ask questions, challenge these ideas, but the fundamental thing one wants to do is be in harmony with the flow of all things. Now, I'm going to say that a culture begins by laying down its epic poem and its temple form. And in its epic poem, it's going to describe the moral structure of the possibilities of your life. In its temple form, it's going to depict the range of possible motion, both physically and metaphorically, that one can engage in. And so we see in a Chinese temple, open to the flow of nature to flow through it. We see in Chinese art, human beings almost indistinguishable from nature, integrated with it. And 2 of the great cultural works, the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, which talks about the Tao as the flow of all things, the way of all things, and one should put oneself in accord with the flow of nature. But they don't really mean nature. They mean nature as standing in for all things. So, and then in Confucianism, we put ourselves in harmony with the social order. So Confucianism tells you what should be your relationship to other people and the larger society. Taoism tells you what should be your relationship to nature. And then, how many people have read Journey to the West? Anybody? Tell us what it's about. Okay, so it's about a figure called Monkey, right? And it opens with Monkey being born from a cracked open cosmic egg. And Monkey is a superhero. He's very strong and powerful, but he knocks things over in heaven. So the gods get fed up and put him in an iron cage. But then a monk is traveling to the west. What's the west for China? India, to get sacred texts. And the monk and his party need a guardian. And so Monkey becomes their guide and guardian in their journey to the west, and they have lots of adventures. But Monkey doesn't freelance. Monkey acts for the greater good as determined by the gods and the monks. He's in trouble when he freelances. In India, we have the notion that this world is an illusion. Real reality is a transcendent oneness. And we have to function in this world, but our highest ambition is to achieve transcendent oneness, nirvana, life, death without rebirth. We have the Buddhist stupa that embodies that. The Buddha is about that. We have the great epic text for India is the Mahabharata, which is about this many books on the shelf. It's like an Encyclopedia Britannica. And most of it hasn't even been translated. But the most famous book is the Bhagavad Gita, in which Prince Arjuna is instructed in the ways of reincarnation. In the Middle East, in the biblical traditions, we have the notion that the world was created by a creator who left instructions. What does God tell Abraham to do? Sacrifice his son Isaac. And why does Abraham ultimately not do that?
Because God stops him.
God sends an angel to stop him. It didn't occur to him to not do it. He says, wait a minute, are you nuts? You obey in these traditions. The creator created, the world was created by a creator who left instructions. It's our job to conform to those instructions, not to freelance, not to think for yourself. So that's a Middle Eastern tradition. Architecture is often the dome of a small world, as opposed to these people. These people are very comfortable with infinities, infinities of infinities. These people are in a very confined world. The Greeks and Romans brought about the first notion of the emergence of the individual. And standing in for humans, the Titan Prometheus does what? What does he do? Gets him in trouble.
He steals something, right?
He steals what?
Lightning? Fire.
Fire. And does what with it? Steals fire from the gods and gives it to humans. But not only fire, but the sciences and the arts. And Zeus freaks out. Why is Zeus so upset?
Because humans may overthrow them.
You idiot! They're going to overthrow us! And so he punishes Prometheus by chaining him to a rock. And an eagle tortures him. But Prometheus is defiant but resigned to his fate. These people, the West, also have this notion of the emergence of an individual. But they also have a notion that the moral compass is in the heart of each individual. What you should do, you have to know, not from the ways of nature, not from identity with infinity, not from instructions in a book, but by your own inner moral compass. We'll see an example of that in a minute. And here is a Renaissance building with the dome marking where the human being stands. Now, Prometheus is resigned to his fate. What's the ultimate fate? Besides taxes.
Death?
Yeah, you can't get away from death. They say, Benjamin Franklin is famous for saying, you can't escape death and taxes. So I happen to be the director of research for Timeship. Our clients intend to be immortal. They've spent over $100 million on finding a genetic cause of death and turn it off. Here's the building we're building. These are tanks of liquid nitrogen for maintaining 50,000 frozen people until they can be re-engineered and fixed and brought back. We got to figure out how to dye a parrot red without it getting freaked out for our phoenix. So you go through all the billionaires. Larry Page of Google, Jeff Bezos of Amazon. You go down the list. They've all started health companies. They go to their biotech buddies and say, what's this aging thing? And their biotech buddy says, well, it's in the genes. And then they say, well, how do you fix it? And they say, well, with $1 billion budget, we might get somewhere. Fine, here's a check, get it fixed. So these people aren't accepting fate. They're going to change it. So these are 5 different cultural worldviews. And let's just look at a couple of them. And there are quite a few, and there's lots of subtleties, but just zooming in on these. Again, here's Prajna Paramita. And here's Michelangelo's David. This guy's got a lot of anatomy. And so the word humanism, we're really interested in the human being. The psychology, the character, the body. These artists know the body intimately. They've done cadaver anatomy. They know every organ, how all the muscles attach. These people have spent decades or hundreds of years in the tradition meditating, in which they research how the mind works, how it's connected to larger things. So 2 different traditions represented in their different art. So having studied Buddhism for a while and living in a world of materialism and being kind of up on science and knowing a little bit about Christianity because it's all around us, I had fun making a little chart of 3 different worldviews, and you could have more. I should redo this and add China, but Buddhism, which we can identify with India, Christianity, and modern scientific materialism. So first of all, for Buddhism, for materialism, the cosmos is matter, energy, and the laws of physics. That's all there is. That's everything. Now, we also notice that we have consciousness. Consciousness is not real. It's emergent. It's a function of the firing of neurons. But it's not a thing. It's emergent. For Christianity, the cosmos is God, human, and nature. And they're metaphysically different. They're 3 different things. And there are a couple of other things. What else is there besides God, human, and nature? An intermediate thing.
Spirit, soul.
Well, let's say souls are in humans. Angels. So angels are another. There's God, angels, human, nature. But this sort of presents it. For Buddhism, ultimate reality is the foundation of all material world and of consciousness is the cosmos is constituted of the consciousness of all beings, the interrelated consciousness of all beings. That's the ultimate reality. For Buddhism, time is infinite. Nothing changes. Change is illusion. I once said to one of my Buddhist teachers, is Buddha consciousness today any different? Is Buddha consciousness now any different than it was in Buddha's time? And he said, is today any different from yesterday? For materialism, time is very difficult, probably dependent on energy and matter. But is time real? Why? The laws of physics say things should be reversible, but they're not. So it's a real struggle. For Christianity, time is really interesting. And I think a lot of the dynamism of Western culture comes from the Christian notion of time. It changes. First of all, there was a really big event 5,000 years ago. What was that? I mean, really big.
Earth.
The creation of the world. Right, that was pretty big. And then 2,000 years ago, there was a major moral event.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Everybody before Jesus cannot go to heaven. People after Jesus have the potential to go to heaven, but people before Jesus cannot go to heaven. So Dante has a really nice, what's the intermediate realm?
Purgatory?
Purgatory. Has a really nice purgatory for all the great, like Plato and Aristotle, all these greats who can't go to heaven because they're before Jesus. And then there's going to be another really big one. What's that?
The second coming.
Right. It's all going to wrap up. So this is really dynamic sense of time. Things really change. In Buddhism, I put the soul in quotes because it's a related concept. But the soul is eternal and reincarnates. So Buddhism doesn't make any sense unless you believe in reincarnation. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. But the notion is, and there's even a notion of simultaneous reincarnation. There's a Buddhist meditation in which if time is infinite and we keep reincarnating, everybody is reincarnated as everybody at some point. So in this meditation, you imagine your worst enemy and realize at some point they were your mother. Because everything has reincarnated at everything at some point. So it's all interrelated. And the soul is dependent on good actions or karma. Nirvana is death without reincarnation. In early Buddhism and later Buddhism, it all stays dynamic. Christianity, again, is very interesting. The soul makes a one-way trip. So, anybody here a Christian? Where is the soul before your conception?
It's arguable.
Okay, so at the point of conception or birth, the soul zaps in. And sometimes it comes from out there, and as it passes through the spheres, which are the orbits of each of the planets, it picks up its psychological characteristics. And then at death, it spends eternity with God or in hell. So, but it makes a one-way trip, unlike Buddhism, where it's continually recycling. In materialism, there is no soul, just the firing of neurons. And then God, so in Christianity, God is omnipotent, can do anything, which is very confusing. Like, why did he make such a mess? If it's a he. And what's the wise-ass question that a 9-year-old asks of the minister or priest?
Why couldn't you do this?
Can God make a rock so heavy that he can't pick it up? But anyway, God is omnipotent. In Buddhism, like the Greeks, there are gods, and they're sort of metaphorical and they have all the foibles humans have, only more so. But they sort of are manifest, like among the Greeks, Athena is the goddess of wisdom, Venus is the goddess of love, Mars is the god of war. So all the human attributes are represented in these deities. In scientific materialism, God is a delusion of those who are irrational. So in looking at cultures, I think it's interesting to go through this chart and imagine you could do China, Japan, Korea, Russia, Eastern Orthodox, on and on, and see how these different beliefs are different. But to me, knowing who and where you are, what you believe, who you are, is going to give you the internal power from which to express your creativity. And if you simply want to stay out of trouble, get a good job, and lead a moral life, and if you're in advertising, don't work for a cigarette company, fine, you'll have a good life, you'll be a good person, but I don't think you'll be a Beethoven, or a Picasso, or a Newton, or a Van Gogh. Those people really got into who they were and came from that and didn't let anybody stand in their way. And some of them were Picasso was a really nasty person. So if you're interested, there's a, I have to get back to it, but there's a wonderful biography of Picasso by Ariana Huffington, who does Huffington Post, or originally did it. She sold it. I don't know if she's able to do it anymore. It's a beautiful biography. And it was exactly what I was looking for, tying together his life and his art. It's an artistic biography as well as a personal biography. And I picked up, there's a Museum of Modern Art catalog that has just about every important piece of his. So I can, follow what they're talking about, what she's talking about in the biography. So, and I would recommend, if you want to look to sources to empower yourself as a person and as a creative being, more than anything else, I would recommend biographies. Good biographies. Pick somebody you admire. Who's your favorite artist? Somebody. It's okay. But say again? Okay. Anybody into Frida Kahlo? Anybody you're into, read a biography of them and see how they did it. How'd they do that? Anybody see the Mel Brooks Frankenstein movie?
Yeah.
When he finds the book, his father's or his grandfather's, I don't know which it is, book, what was the title? How I Did It. So anyway, I recommend biographies. So just looking at China and Japan and then the West. And this is rather arbitrary. We could look at a dozen other cultures, but in understanding China, we might start with geomancy. So who can tell me what geomancy is? Who can tell me what feng shui is? Anybody? Yeah, so 10 years ago, 20 years ago, everybody was into feng shui. Barnes & Noble had like a whole shelf of feng shui books. And it's how to arrange your furniture, your life, put a crystal on your window, which way your bed should face, where the entrance of your apartment should be for good feng shui energy. So geomancy is earth energy, feng shui is wind and water, it's the same thing. But you want your life in general, your architecture in particular, trying to get an arrow here. Hang on. Where'd it go? Let me just check something. So, has anybody had acupuncture?
Oh my god.
Okay. It didn't go well? You're not supposed to feel it.
No, I moved. You're not supposed to move, and it bruised.
Yeah. So, how does acupuncture work? What does it do? Why do you do it?
I guess it's so based on Eastern medicine and like following meridians and acupressure points or whatever, and trying to like release knots and regulate energy and increase blood flow.
Right. Flows of energy. So we're made up of flows of energy. Disease is a blockage of proper flow. The acupuncture needle stimulates a reestablishment of proper flow. So in China, architecture is acupuncture of the earth, and you want your building to be in harmonious flow. If you put it where bad energies are flowing through it, it could screw up your life, your family, your business. In the West, every hero slays a dragon. Hercules, Perseus, they're all dragon slayers. In China, the dragon is venerated. The dragon is the energies of the Earth Mother. And so in the West, we conquer and control the natural energies of nature. In China, culturally, now the Chinese are as bad with the environment today as anybody else. They build a new coal-fired electrical plant belching out coal smoke every week. But culturally, they seek to be in harmony with the Earth's energies rather than control them. Three of our key texts are the Tao Te Ching, My favorite translation is Fwang in English. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of the 10,000 things. Ever desire less, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. So you should do both. Engage in the world and seek to win, and stand back and appreciate the natural flow of all things. Confucius presents a set of rules for all of your social relationships. What should be the relationship of a daughter to our father, the father to the son, the subject to the emperor to the subject? Everybody's relationships are prescribed, and if everybody follows them, all will be harmonious. So, natural harmony, social harmony, and finally, Journey to the West, that the superhero works within the prescriptions of the society. So this is an exaggeration, but here, there are people here. Here's one. And there's architecture here, but it's blended with nature. Here we can tell which is nature and which is the human being in the most famous Western painting, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. And here is Ise Shrine that we looked at before, and it's rebuilt every 20 years, and the wood is deliberately unfinished, not varnished, so that it's not protected. It naturally rots, and then it's rebuilt every 20 years. So, we can look at Islam, one of the biblical traditions. So the notion in the biblical traditions is the world was created by a creator who left instructions. And if we go back to Mesopotamia, Babylonian Empire, those instructions might be in the patterns of the constellations. And in the biblical Judaism, Christianity, Islam, it's in a book, Old Testament, the New Testament, and Islam adds the Quran. And as taught by Muhammad and his followers, there are 5 pillars of Islam, 5 things you have to do to be a good Muslim. Submission to Allah. Anybody here Islamic? Okay, because you could correct me if I get anything wrong. Submission to Allah. There is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. Pray 5 times a day facing Mecca. Give alms to the poor. Observe the annual fast of Ramadan. And try to make at least one pilgrimage to Mecca in one's lifetime. And so we have the importance of the dome, these incredibly beautiful tiled domes, very symbolic of a small local world. Now there's an image that, let's see if I can find it quickly. So if we look at Jewish model of the universe, and this is true of Judaism, Islam, and early Christianity. Here's the world. There's an underworld, and then there's a dome, or ocean of heaven, and a firmament with the stars. It's very small and local. And India always had a notion of eons of, Kali Yuga, yugas of time. And a yuga is like 100,000 years or something. And there are thousands of yugas. And so vast space, vast time. But these biblical traditions are very local. And so here's a notion in the late Middle Ages of, here's this confining little dome. What if we look out? What's beyond that? And then comes the Renaissance of, maybe there's more. Maybe there's infinities out there. This is a Jewish worldview.
That's a Jewish. Okay. I've never seen them.
Let's try this. Hang on. There it is. I said Jewish cosmology, and it popped up a dozen of these. So Judaism, Hinduism gets very into cosmology. Judaism does not. Judaism is more interested in the moral relationships among people, not how far is it to Alpha Centauri. Hinduism is. Hinduism is more abstract. Judaism is more, what are my obligations to my neighbor? What does it mean to be a good person? And Islam is a descendant of this tradition. So this dome of heaven. And then the West, the temple form is the Gothic cathedral, and the epic poems are the Arthurian romances. So I'll describe two, maybe one. We're running out of time, but I'm almost done. So in the Arthurian romances are the tales of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And there's Lancelot and Guinevere and Arthur and Percival and etc. They all have their stories. In one of them, the knights are gathered at the Round Table, and the Holy Grail. Now, the Holy Grail is the thing they're looking for. Never say what it is. It's just the thing they're looking for, the thing. So, just to jump over to another art form, Alfred Hitchcock has a term for that. The thing that everybody's chasing. What does he call that? Anybody? He just made up a word, the MacGuffin. So the movie is about everybody's chasing something, the MacGuffin. Doesn't matter what it is, but that's how you get an adventure movie or suspense. They're all chasing the thing. So that's what drives the movie. So the Holy Grail is the MacGuffin. So the Holy Grail appears at a dinner at the Round Table. And one of the knights says, I propose that we take a vow to not eat this supper until we have viewed the Grail unveiled. And they all set forth on the quest, and each entered the forest in a different place where there was no path or way, feeling it would be a disgrace to take the path of another. If there's a path, it's where somebody else went. It's not your path, it's somebody else's path. Your path is where there's no path or way because you haven't gone there yet. So that's what the Arthurian romances tell us. And very quickly, I'll give you the story of Parsifal, very abbreviated. He's an innocent knight. His heart is pure, and he's therefore invincible. And he comes to the Fisher King castle. Fisher King has been wounded. The wound won't heal. His land is a wasteland. Parsifal comes in, and he's moved to say what ails you, which would have cured the king. But for the first time, he remembers A knight is not supposed to speak to a king until spoken to first. He doesn't say anything, he fails the quest, because he obeys the rules of society rather than his own inner impulses or the wisdom of his own heart. And then eventually he comes back and does the right thing. Here is a Gothic cathedral, Chartres. Through the stained glass we have an interpenetration of inside and outside, an interrelationship between the spiritual and material worlds. The flying buttresses carry the forces of the interior to the outside. The stained glass allows the luminous presence of God to come into the interior, just as we want the luminous presence of God to penetrate into our own heart. And these people then have laid down what they're going to do. Standing in the nave of the Gothic cathedral, it's immediately evident that it will be the descendants of the builders of this cathedral who will circle the globe and go into space. They've laid the whole plan down in the architecture of their temple form, just as did the Greeks, the Egyptians, etc. This is the home for these people. Renaissance Villa Rotunda, which puts the human being in the center, at the center of the X, Y, and Z axes of Cartesian coordinates, allowing man to be the measure of all things. And let's just take a minute to wrap up. We've got a couple more slides. So here are two worldviews from the Tao Te Ching. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. The universe is sacred. You cannot improve it. If you try to change it, you will ruin it. If you try to hold it, you will lose it. So that's Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching. Here is a passage from Ray Kurzweil. The singularity is near. Ray Kurzweil is the most important futurist at the moment. He's been working on developing artificial intelligence, and he was recently given the most dangerous position you could for somebody working on artificial intelligence, which is what? He's chief scientist of Google. He has at his fingertips 100 million computers. So this is a book he wrote. The singularity is when human consciousness merges with artificial intelligence. And here are some people who think that way. Seth Lloyd, who believes that the universe is a program. Some things weren't right. He's working on reprogramming it. He's a quantum theorist at MIT. This is Timeship that I just told you about. This is a group called 2045, a group of Russian oligarchs who are building avatars into which to download themselves. And Ray Kurzweil writes, the explosive nature of exponential growth means it will only take a quarter of a millennium to go from sending messages on horseback, 250 years ago, we're sending messages on horseback, to saturating matter and energy of the solar system with sublimely intelligent processes, sprinkling sensors and chips around the solar system. The ongoing expansion of our future superintelligence will then require moving out to the rest of the universe, where we may engineer new universes. We have a pretty good idea how to make a universe. It just takes so much energy that it's not going to be doable for a while. So here is the architecture of these two cultures. Here is, now switching over to Japan, Katsura Imperial Villa, asymmetrical. flowing spaces, interpenetration of inside and outside, integrated with its landscape. Here is Villa Rotunda of the Renaissance, putting the human being in the center, dominating its landscape. And here is Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. Which one is it more similar to? Where are we today? Give you something to think about. So that wraps it up.